Billionaire secretly followed his loyal. Made one night, what he discovered will make you cry. There are nights in this world that change a person, not the loud ones. Not the ones you see coming with fanfare and headlines. The quiet ones. The ones that find you in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning. Standing behind frosted glass, watching someone pray and realizing you never truly knew the person who had been walking through your front door every single day for 11 years. That was the night Edward Calloway finally saw Dorothy Reed for who she really was. And nothing was ever the same after that. Edward Calloway was 62 years old, silver-haired, and the kind of man who filled rooms without trying. He'd built his commercial real estate empire the old-fashioned way, working 18-hour days in his 30s, eating sandwiches at his desk, missing his son's little league games, far more often than he ever admitted to himself. By the time the money really came, he had a beautiful house in Charleston, South Carolina, a company worth more zeros than most people could count, and a hollow feeling in his chest that no amount of success seemed to fill. He wasn't a cruel man. He wasn't even a particularly cold one. He was just distracted, always somewhere else in his mind, even when he was standing right in front of you. Dorothy Reed had been his housekeeper since Marcus, his son, was in 3rd grade. She'd come recommended by a neighbor, a quiet, dependable woman, they said, who did things right the first time and never made a fuss. Edward had barely registered her face in those early years. She was part of the house to him, the way the grandfather clock in the foyer was part of the house, reliable, present, fading into the background. She was in her early 50s now, with warm brown skin and her hair always pulled back neatly at the nape of her neck, the kind of posture that came not from privilege, but from years of carrying herself with quiet dignity, through rooms that didn't always make her feel welcome. She had gentle eyes, the kind that noticed things. When Marcus left for college, it was Dorothy who quietly boxed up his room. When Edward's wife Helen passed away 3 years ago, it was Dorothy who kept the house from falling apart. She didn't say much. She just kept showing up, kept doing the work. Edward paid her well, he told himself. He was generous at Christmas. He said thank you, but he never actually saw her. It was a Tuesday in late November when it started. Edward had been working late in his study, the kind of late where the whole house goes dark and the silence gets heavy. He noticed Dorothy hadn't left at her usual time. 6 o'clock came and went. 6:30. He heard her on the phone, in the kitchen. Her voice lower than usual, tightly controlled. The kind of voice people use when they are trying very hard not to cry in front of anyone. He didn't mean to listen. He told himself that later. But the kitchen. Daughter was cracked and the house was silent as a held breath. They say the treatment's working, baby, she was saying. You hear me? They say it's working. You just gotta keep fighting. Mama's gonna be there soon as I'm done. I promise you. I promise. Edward stepped back. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the floor. He didn't ask her anything that night. He didn't know how. He said goodnight as she gathered her coat and her purse. She smiled at him, that same steady, composed smile she always offered, and she walked out into the cold, dark November evening, and something in Edward Calloway's chest pulled tight, like a stitch coming undone. He told himself he wasn't following her. He was just driving, taking a late ride to clear his head, the way he sometimes did when sleep wouldn't come. But his car turned down the same route Dorothy had taken, and when he saw her old green sedan pull into the parking structure of Charleston Memorial Children's Hospital, he slowed. He pulled over across the street. He sat there in the dark for a moment. Then he got out of the car. He told himself later he didn't really know why. He just felt pulled, the way you feel pulled toward a fire when the night is cold. He followed her at a distance, through the parking structure, through the sliding glass doors of the hospital. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and something warmer, coffee, maybe from a nurse's station. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. Dorothy walked like she knew every corner of this place. She greeted the woman at the front desk by name. She knew which elevator to take without checking a sign. Edward stayed back. He took the stairs. He found the pediatric ward on the 4th floor and moved quietly down the hallway until he saw her through a large glass window. She was sitting beside a hospital bed. In the bed was a boy, small, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with a breathing tube and a little stuffed bear tucked against his side. He was sleeping. His face was peaceful in the way children's faces are peaceful in sleep. Soft and unguarded, trusting the world completely, even when the world hasn't earned it. Dorothy had her hands folded together, pressed to her lips. Her eyes were closed. She was praying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just moving her lips in that slow, private way of someone who has been doing this a long time, someone who knows by now that prayer isn't about being heard by the whole room. It's about being heard by the one who matters. Edward stood on the other side of that glass for a long time. He thought about Helen, about how in her final weeks, he used to sit by her bed at night and feel completely helpless. All that money, all that power, and nothing he could do to fix the one thing that mattered. He remembered the weight of that helplessness like a stone in his hands. Dorothy knew that weight too. He could see it in every line of her body. He didn't go in. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was just a man behind frosted glass who had finally stopped being somewhere else in his mind. He found out the rest gradually, not by prying but by finally asking. Her grandson's name was Marcus, the same name as his son. Edward felt something turn over quietly in his chest when she told him that. Marcus Reed was 9 years old, and he had been fighting leukemia for 14 months. Dorothy's daughter, Renee, was a single mother. Her husband had left years ago, and she worked 2 jobs to cover what insurance didn't. Dorothy had been working extra hours wherever she could find them, not spending a cent she didn't have to, sending every spare dollar to Renee to help with the bills. The hospital had a family lounge on the 4th floor where Dorothy slept some nights. Rather than drive the 40 minutes home and back again, she'd never asked Edward for a thing, not once. She'd just kept folding his laundry and polishing his floors and smiling that steady, composed smile of hers and going quietly to war every single evening on behalf of a little boy with a stuffed bear and a fighting heart. Edward sat across from her at the kitchen table the morning she finally told him all of this. He'd asked her to sit down, not to give her instructions or go over the week's schedule, but just to sit, just to talk. It had startled her. He could see that. He wasn't sure he'd ever done that before. "Dorothy," he said, "why didn't you ever say anything?" She looked at him for a moment, that steady gaze of hers, and then she said something he would never forget. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "everybody's carrying something. I don't ever like to make my something somebody else's burden." He had to look away. He looked out the kitchen window at the bare November trees. "Well," he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended, "maybe some burdens aren't meant to be carried alone." He didn't make a production of it. That wasn't his way, and it wouldn't have been right. He called his attorney. He made arrangements. He covered the remaining balance of Marcus's treatment costs, all of it, and set up a fund that would carry the family through the next 2 years without strain. He arranged for Renee to take a leave from her second job. He made sure Dorothy knew she could take whatever time she needed to be with her family, without losing a day of pay. When Dorothy found out, she stood in his kitchen doorway with her hand over her mouth and her eyes full. She didn't sob. She wasn't a woman who sobbed. But those eyes, those steady, warm, quiet eyes, filled all the way up. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, Edward said. That's the whole point, I reckon. She laughed then, a soft, surprised laugh, the kind that comes out when you're so full of emotion that laughter is the only thing that fits. And Edward laughed too, just a little. It had been a while since he'd done that. Little Marcus came home the following spring. Dorothy brought him by the house. One Saturday afternoon, a boy small for his age with curious, bright eyes and a laugh that seemed too big for his frame. He shook Edward's hand very seriously, the way a child does when a grown-up has taught them that handshakes matter. He told Edward he wanted to be a doctor when he grew up. A doctor, Edward said, looking down at him. Shoot, that sounds about right to me, kiddo. Marcus grinned. Dorothy stood a few feet away, watching. Her hair was down that day. Edward had never seen her wear it down before. She looked lighter somehow. Not younger exactly, but unburdened, like a woman who had put down a heavy box and finally remembered what it felt like to stand up straight. Edward thought about the night behind the frosted glass, about how long it had taken him to really look, how many mornings she had walked through his front door carrying all of that. And he had simply said good morning and gone back to his phone. He thought about Helen, about Marcus, his Marcus, living in Denver now with 2 kids of his own, about all the time that slips past, while you're busy being somewhere else in your mind. There's a particular kind of grace, he thought, in people who just keep showing up, who carry their burdens without complaint and still find room to smile at you, still sweep your floors, still fold your life into neat, careful order, all while fighting their own quiet wars. He had lived beside that grace for 11 years and never seen it. He was grateful, more grateful than he knew how to say. That one cold November night, something had pulled him out of his own head long enough to finally look. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please take a moment to share it with someone you love, maybe someone you've been meaning to call, or check on, or simply thank. The world has more Dorothys in it than we realize. People who carry everything quietly and ask for nothing in return. If you're new here, we'd love to have you stay a while. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. And leave a comment below. Tell us about someone in your life who carries their burdens with that kind of quiet grace. We read every single one, and your words mean more than you know. Thank you, folks, truly. Take care of each other out there.